Company of Heroes Blitzkrieg is one of the most well-known mods for Company of Heroes since, well, a long time. It's been around for over a decade at this point, and it's even on Steam with its own page and unique download. You need to own the base game to play it, but it works with any and all combinations of the original game and its expansions, so Opposing Fronts and Tales of Valor. The mod is still being worked on today, with updates and changes being delivered through the Steam client, and active discussions on the mod being held there, as well as on the official forum. There's obviously been a lot of buzz around Company of Heroes as a series recently, with the launch of COH 3 on PC in Feb and consoles just last month. There's a lot of discussions happening across the player base right now on its quality, the state of the franchise, and the potentially embarrassing player counts, with Company of Heroes 2, a 10-year-old game, having the leg up over its few-month-old sequel. There's also the recent laying off of over 100 Relic employees, leading to speculation on whether the plan is to cut the legs out from underneath COH 3 and leave it languishing as they did for Dawn of War 3 a few years back. Relic has assured players that they're in for the long haul with this one, but I doubt a few words will appease most people. Actions speak louder than words, as we all know, and any serious amounts of that are yet to materialise. Anyway, the reason I'm talking about all this is that with the state of the franchise currently, people looking to get their COH fix may be looking elsewhere to find it. That could be in Company of Heroes 2, 1, or as we're going to look at now, a mod. There are many popular mods out there of course, and fear not, they will get their time in the spotlight. But for now, let's discuss Blitzkrieg, and see if it's the best way to play Company of Heroes in 2023. The core principles of Blitzkrieg are simple. The main idea is to provide a more realistic experience compared to the base game, so that includes things like infantry and tanks being far more susceptible to their respective counters, and all-around increase to weapon ranges, and the removal of team colours on units. There are other changes too though that don't necessarily focus on realism, but do add depth. Doctrine command trees have been hugely expanded, as has the veterancy system, and there's a ton of new units that come with new effects, sounds, and descriptions, and there's also a few dozen maps to go along with it. The most noticeable gameplay difference is in the general squishiness of units across the board. While the original game certainly didn't go easy on you for putting infantry in front of a machine gun without cover, Blitzkrieg is straight up cruel. Here, if you position a squad poorly, they are wiped out in seconds flat. If left out in the open with no cover, they'll be made short work of by any old squad, emplacement, or vehicle who has them in sight. This makes utilising cover exceedingly important, and micromanagement a necessity. Units can survive and be effective if you position them smartly and put them in a place to win, but it requires real effort at a squad level, with thought into unit upgrades and loadouts to ensure that they're well prepared. And you could imagine that if you've got half a dozen squads on the go at any one time, there's going to be a lot of things to worry about. And if you thought that I'm making infantry sound squishy, well, you just wait until you see the armour. Basically, if any of these guys just get a whiff of a flak emplacement or a mobile AA, they are toast. Hell, even one dude with a Panzerfaust will make short work of all but the heaviest of armoured vehicles. I'm not sure it's entirely realistic that basically any tank will be obliterated into a massive explosion with 1 or 2 or maybe 3 shots if you're lucky from the enemy, but it certainly makes you think more. Having these enhanced vulnerabilities for all kinds of units make Company of Heroes' emphasis on combined arms tactics even more significant. It's basically a requirement to have tanks supported by infantry, infantry covered by armour, and all of them supported by specialist units like snipers, recon units, and mortars. Because if you leave any unit caught out by an enemy with the correct counter, they're done, and you are not getting those resources back. Blitzkrieg is made for both PvP and PvE games, and for the latter, the AI obviously needed to be tuned to make use of all the new units and abilities that are now available to it. And it does okay. It mostly works as you'd expect. It creates unit counters, evolves through the tech tree, etc. If you're not looking too hard, you might not notice how it clearly doesn't use much of the unit roster, never uses doctrine abilities from what I can tell, and how it often just sits there and does nothing for a while. But for what it is, it's really not too bad. There are bigger issues with Blitzkrieg that I have that'll make any complaints about the AI seem insignificant. But before we get to those, I want to make sure that everyone's up to date with the accessibility of Blitzkrieg, because the answer to some of these complaints that I'm about to make could simply be play an earlier version. But you can't do that. So Blitzkrieg was released on Steam, like I said, in 2017, after being available through ModDB since its release. And with this new release came benefits, like being able to download and install with just one click without any hassles of installing and launching it manually, having automatic updates, version syncing with other players, and more. But what it also brought was the inability to roll back to previous releases, and the removal of old file downloads on ModDB for some reason, meaning if you want to play Blitzkrieg, unless you have an earlier version downloaded already, you can only access it through Steam and you have to play the current build. This does mean that the PvP community is somewhat more catered for thanks to everyone running the same version at the same time, but aside from that, I can't really think of much reason to remove the earlier versions if people want to play them, except for maybe simpler compatibility by only needing to support a single version of the base game? I don't know, is there really anything else? The main issue arising from not having the ability to roll back is that, based on what I've read, there's a lot of people out there who don't like version 5 and beyond of Blitzkrieg, and would much prefer to play a previous version. 4.8 is one I see brought up a lot. Now, look, I can't speak to this personally, as my historical experience with the mod is limited. I played it for a few hours years ago when I made my review of Company of Heroes 1, and maybe 1 or 2 games back in the early 2010s soon after it came out, but that's just a guess. The main complaints I've read are to do with tanks not auto-firing at infantry when equipped with armor-piercing ammo, which is a feature, not a bug, issues with AI revisions, buggy releases, general balance issues that either make certain units too good or too bad, and the overall trajectory of the mod leaning towards a PvP-focused experience. It sounds like earlier versions before 5.0 were more catered to PvE, while post 5.0 saw a focus into PvP, something a lot of people didn't play the mod for, and something that took away from the PvE gameplay that players could no longer take part in thanks to the Steam release and removal of historical ModDB downloads. But in saying that, I have read a lot of positive sentiment about the last few releases too, since 5.0 as well, so it's hard to make any definitive statements around any potential quality degradation myself with my lack of experience with older versions. So let me know in the comments if you can shed any more light on this. But what I can speak to is what I think of the mod now and how it plays today. And I've got to admit here, after a few games, it was not positive, not at all. The biggest issue I found is just how quickly units die. Now look, I know it's meant to be realistic or whatever, but the speed of it is ridiculous, in particular with tanks and armoured vehicles. Like, sure, I can understand an infantry squad being leveled by a mounted gun in a second, yep, I can believe that. And yeah, I could even get behind a tank being transformed into a hunk of burning metal in a shot or two by a powerful gun. But it feels like anything with an anti-tank label just destroys all but the heaviest armour in a split second. Tanks will just explode out of nowhere, from 100 health to 0 in an instant, because some mobile gun or infantry-based anti-tank weapon that was hidden away off screen or behind a building snap-fired to it. The removal of team colours doesn't help visibility either, and yeah, I know again that this was done for realism, but all it does for me is make tanks blend into the ground and infantry harder to control and counter. This game in particular was quite frustrating. This was a 2v2, me and a mate versus 2 AI, just on normal difficulty, nothing insane or anything, and both of us had played our fair share of Company of Heroes, him especially. But we just couldn't get a hold of anything on the map after the first 20 minutes or so. The AI were just coming out of the shadows, destroying our units in a second before we could do anything, and the win-more nature of Company of Heroes resource points made it impossible for us to claw anything back. We just got crushed and crushed and crushed. We were honestly laughing by the end, tank after tank just getting detonated in seconds from somewhere off screen. And it continued like that until we hit an inflection point. A moment of enlightenment that began to change our outlook on Blitzkrieg forever. It was this game, a 2v2 comp stomp on a bridge map known for PvE. The kind of map it was forced slow interactions from both us and the AI, and it forced us to take our time, but more importantly, it didn't allow huge rushes from either side. Every inch of land had to be fought for, thanks to the choke points and easily defendable positions. And this game was really fun. What I liked about this, and future games we did after it, was how it emphasised and exaggerated fundamental Company of Heroes mechanics that are often overlooked in the base game. Things like infantry cover and defensive emplacements. Yes, they are important in the original game, but you can play and win without paying too much attention to either of them if you want to. But in Blitzkrieg, they are really important and will literally be the deciding factor between getting completely obliterated and actually having a fighting chance. Other mechanics like environmental destruction and fire support are much more impactful too. A couple of artillery positions can completely lock down a choke point just on their own, requiring counter-fire or flanking maneuvers to be eliminated, and with that, bridges and buildings are a lot more effective too, with the former taking a long time to be rebuilt and acting as critical choke points, and the latter providing critical infantry cover and recruitment points across the map. After this game of enlightenment, my mindset shifted and I started to enjoy Blitzkrieg a lot more. I really do think it's about coming in with the right mindset and the right expectations. While I don't play PvP personally, I would especially not play it in Blitzkrieg. In my mind, this works best as a co-op or single-player comp stomping mod made for slow turtle strategies. And while yeah, there are still things that annoy me about the mod, a lot, coming at it from the right angle made it a far more enjoyable experience, and something I would actually consider playing on the regular as a permanent fixture of my list of co-op RTSs. Now lastly, I do have to go back to the negatives really quickly just to talk about performance a bit, because for me it did get pretty bad. 1v1 games were okay, but as soon as I added more players, multiplayer, or bigger maps, or all of the above, it stuttered quite a lot. The FPS was okay, but the stutters just killed me once you got into the game past about 30 minutes, and it was really bad when I just panned around the map with the middle mouse button, making me think this is maybe something to do with the zoomed out camera, perhaps as well as the engine just not being able to handle all the new stuff going on. This is anecdotal evidence though, because the friend I was playing with didn't really have any of these issues nearly as much as I did. He just lost some FPS going from like 150 to 80 or so. Still completely playable. So your mileage may vary, I did just want to mention it. Right then, so is Blitzkrieg the best way to play Company of Heroes in 2023? Maybe, like man, for the right person? I don't know, even then, I don't think so. I do think you have to be specifically looking for this kind of experience to enjoy it. Otherwise, you'll just find it frustrating. And I do think the vast majority of people will be better serviced with Company of Heroes, even just the base game, Company of Heroes 2 or Company of Heroes 3. And I really honestly can't imagine many people playing this for PvP. It just seems too punishing. But hey, maybe you're into that kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know, it might not be the best way to play, I don't think it is, but it is a different way to play, and that's an important distinction. Because for that reason alone, I'd say it's worth trying out if you're interested and like the sound of it. Especially if you're a Company of Heroes veteran who's bored with the current status quo and wants something new. But if you've been playing Blitzkrieg for quite a while, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the current release and maybe even earlier releases, and if they've changed a lot and what you think of that, if it's been for the better or for the worse. Let me know in the comments, I would really love to hear your thoughts. And thanks very much for watching. Big ups to my supporters here on YouTube via memberships or over on Patreon. You can join for as little as $1 a month, which comes with access to the Discord as well as other benefits. You'll join legends like Aero, Jack, Nutty Jawa, Overlord Jeebus, T-Edits, Crispy Robo Chicken, XV204, Benjamin, David, Cynical Cheddar, and Sebastian, or the Knight tier, Dakayo, David, Nintendo, Bad Ghosts, Sean, Grace Spirit 4, Peter, Tim, George, and Netters at Cavalier, thank you, and my paladins, Johnny Wolf, Marika, and Eric. Thanks very much everyone, you know I hugely appreciate it. Hey, and thanks to John Kaiser at Cavalier and Thomas at Paladin. Thanks so much guys. I recorded this just as I'm uploading because I'd already recorded the outro before you guys joined. But thank you very much. And thank you all again very much for being here, and I'll see you all in the next one.